Hey guys, if you've caught the last few episodes, you have heard me talk about CHAD and a fundraising effort that CHAD is doing. I'm just jumping in here really quickly to remind you, please, if you've not done so already, please go and make a donation. I made a new URL so it's easier for you to remember. It's erictivers.com/Chad. That will bring you to a link that you can click on and you can make a donation right there. It will be in your podcast app. It will be on the show notes page for this episode. Please, Chad needs our help desperately right now. Any donation, small or large, is appreciated. Please join me. I have made a donation. I'm reaching out to as many people as I can, and I'm reaching out to you, asking you. Please don't assume that somebody else will do this. We need your help now. Go to erictivers.com/Chad and help keep CHAD a vibrant, important organization in the lives of people affected by ADHD. Thanks.
It's about negotiation as couples negotiate everything else. The difference is when it comes to what we're having for dinner, neither of us has that much of an emotional investment in your sense of self isn't at stake when we decide what we're having for dinner, as opposed to when we're talking about sex. So, you know what? If you're full on half a bowl of chili and you are fine, then that doesn't mean that the person who made the chili is a crappy cook and you're not satisfied with them, So,
are we really talking about chili here?
I don't think we are.
ADHD Rewired, episode number 55. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant, and I am one of 15 million. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank my sponsors. Support for this podcast comes from Audible. For a free audiobook download, go to erictivers.com/audible for a link for that free download and for some hand-picked recommendations. Go to erictivers.com/audible for your free audiobook download. Zoom video conferencing is so easy to use that with all the extra time I saved not having to configure complicated settings, I recorded this promotion. Support ADHD Rewired and check out Zoom video conferencing. Go to erictivers.com/Zoom. Again, that's erictivers.com/Zoom. Get a Zoom room.
The interview you are about to hear may contain content that is not suitable for younger or more sensitive listeners.
Ari Tuckman, welcome back as I think my only second repeat guest on ADHD Rewired. I think that you were actually my second guest ever on the show.
So that's fitting.
So that is awesome. How are you?
I'm good.
That's awesome. So, Ari and I are friends, and we met about 5 years ago through CHAD. But I brought him back on the show to talk about something that I think is of interest to probably all of us, and that's to talk about sex. So if you don't know Ari, I'm going to extend my hand and pull you out of the hole that you may have been hiding in. So Ari Tuckman is a clinical psychologist. He is a international speaker. He is a therapist. He's a dad. He's a good friend. What did I miss?
I've written a few books.
Podcaster, yeah. Podcast on hiatus, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it'll come back. It
will.
I'll get you to do it. So his podcast is More Attention, Less Deficit. He has a book by the same name. He has a book for clinicians, which is the integrative treatment for adult ADHD.
Yep.
This is all unscripted. Pretty good, huh?
I know.
And he has a workbook, the Executive Function Workbook.
Yeah. Or it's Understand Your Brain, Get More Done.
Yes.
And then that's the subtitle.
I'm really proud of myself right now for none of that was looking at anything. So,
nice.
Because usually I'm like, what's your name?
Right.
So All right, let's talk about sex.
It's a great topic.
So I saw you present about this at the last chat conference. And I know you did a webinar series with Linda Rogley, right?
I did.
And called ADHD Between the Sheets.
Mm-hmm.
So between the sheets and sex, and it's of course this is an interesting topic for really all of us, but why ADHD and sex? And so just kind of take us there. Why was this of interest to you?
Well, the reason why it's of interest is, a couple's sex life is such an important thing. And, for any couple, it's an important thing. You don't have to have a good sex life in order to have a happy relationship. But, what the research finds is that a good sex life adds about 20% to a couple's relationship satisfaction. So you can certainly live without that 20%. But, my joke here is that without that 20%, you're already starting out at a B-, before anything else happens in the day. So why not get that extra 20%? But I think that especially, and this is the ADHD angle, especially for couples who are struggling enough already during the day, they really need that extra 20%. Mm-hmm. And even more so, they don't need another thing to be dissatisfied with each other about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, good sexual experiences and feeling good about each other sexually is an important part of kind of reconnecting as a couple, so that you then have the energy and the goodwill towards each other to slog through all the boring and mundane things like who took out the garbage, as well as slog through the big, important, hairy issues that couples and possibly parents, also have to deal with. Mm-hmm. So it's such an important thing, but it's so easy for a couple's sex life to kind of run off the rails.
So what are some of the common challenges that you're hearing from people that you're talking to? I'm sure that people are sharing stories with you that you never thought you'd hear right. Now that you're talking about this stuff. So what are some of the sort of the themes and that you're getting from just discussions with people?
Mm-hmm. So, the most common one is that there's already too much. Well, let me state it a little bit better. There's not enough goodwill between the partners in the relationship. Meaning just feeling good about each other. Okay. So kind of the cliche, of course, is the ADHD partner being harped at by the non-ADHD partner. You didn't do this. I can't count on you. Why does it all fall to me? Da, da, da. This is kind of like the cliche, broad brushstrokes kind of stuff. So that's not sexy. And that's not going to invite the person with ADHD to be sexually generous or initiate or be open and vulnerable.
I mean, you're not going to have a partner that says, "Don't you like it, honey, how I forgot the garbage again?"
Right. Ooh, you turn me on the way you make me take out the trash all the time. So, and then for the non-ADHD partner,
I like the way you open that top rack.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, I'm done. Keep going.
So, for the non-ADHD partner, then it's one of those things of like, I can't count on you. This isn't fair. Too much of this falls on me. I'm exhausted. Mm-hmm. I'm resentful. Like, again, that's not sexy either, so none of this is sexy. And, so too much of the couple's relationship focuses then on just getting through the day-to-day things. And carving out some time and holding it sacred from intrusions and distractions to spend some time together, kind of sexually or otherwise, but intimately in some sort of way. It kind of gets squeezed out. It falls by the wayside, or there's just not a desire for it. It's kind of like, what? I don't feel comfortable with you right now to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm. The idea of intimacy is not just, a physical concept. I mean, so much of intimacy also has to do with vulnerability. And with vulnerability, may mean that, this is really hard and I'm struggling with this, and it's the same to your partner. And so without that vulnerability piece, it's got to be hard to be intimate.
It does. And especially because, what keeps sex good and also I think what makes sex good in the first place. But I think this is easier in the beginning of the relationship because you're just happy to be there, whatever you're doing together, you know? But I think as a relationship evolves, in order for sex to continue to be interesting and vibrant, just as everything else in the relationship, to keep it interesting and vibrant, requires a certain ability to begin to sort of open up a little bit more. You know, when we first started dating, I didn't know you that well. I didn't feel comfortable sharing with you, but you know, it really kind of turns me on when da-da-da-da-da. Or, you know, that thing that you do,
what were you going to say, Ari? I was really hoping for an example there. When he touched me there.
Right. Yeah. Or when you touch me there, you know, it kind of doesn't, I don't actually like it that much. I think you seem to like it, and that's cool. And maybe I'll go there with you. But, you know, actually, I don't really kind of like that thing, you know, and being able to feel like you can say that without your partner being crushed, without your partner getting angry and defensive. You know, it's like you need to be able to continue to be open and share what you have going on inside with your partner and to explore new possibilities, you know, like especially in a long-term relationship, you know, 10, 20, 40 years later, like you're not the same person 20 years later. In a lot of ways, I would hope you're not the same person in bed 20 years later.
That would be strange.
It would be.
So, you know, when doing research, you know, one of the things we look at is to see, are there differences between groups? So, you know, let me ask you this. What are some of when we look at typical couples without ADHD, you know, I'll throw up a big air quotes and say normal couples. What is the typical sexual behavior of a relationship look like for married and committed couples?
You know, it's a hard question to answer, partially because it's not one answer. You know, like, so you can certainly survey people and get kind of numbers about things like, how often do you have intercourse? You know, and you can interview a whole bunch of different people and you can break it out by like age and demographics and straight or gay or bi or open or whatever. And you can slice and dice the data and get some numbers on that. But I think in some ways it's kind of like, so what? Because, you know, what happens in other houses on the block doesn't matter that much. I mean, I think it's helpful to know, what are other people doing? I'd like some sense of context here, you know?
I hear the Johnsons, you know, you should see the collection of toys that they have.
Yeah. And, you know, that can be a good thing if it kind of gives you a sense of kind of comfort or permission. I think then that's fine to do some social referencing. I think where it's not as fine is when you feel like you're falling short, or if you have weird ideas about like, well, other couples have sex 17 times a week and we only have it twice a week. We're, you know, screwed up in some sort of way, where it's like, you know what, nobody's having sex 17 times a week. Well, maybe prostitutes are, but hopefully they're not the group we're aspiring to. So I think that surveys can be helpful to get some general.
But if we do have any prostitutes as listeners, please use protection.
Exactly. So, you know, so I think a survey is good to find out some of that stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, you don't want to have sex by the statistics, you know. Well, honey, 2.3 times a week, that's the average. And, you know, we don't want to be under 2.3 times. Like, so I think it's more a matter of, you know, surveys can be useful to tell us what is going on in, you know, but you need to look at not just the average, that 2.3, which I'm making up as a number, but, you know, how many people are at 0, how many are at 0.2, how many are at 5, how many are at 8, and, you know, where in that do you fall? But really what matters is, where are you related or relative to where your partner is? And
now, I wonder too how, you know, the issue of not even just comparing to others, but comparing to self as where you were in your relationship when the relationship began. I say I know, I believe that it is common for married couples, once they have kids, sex goes down, especially when kids are young. Is that true?
Yeah. That has been found again and again. Frequency of sex goes down, sexual satisfaction goes down when you have young kids in the house. And it's all the obvious reasons. everybody's busy, everybody's tired. But, there's also an element for some people more than others. It's hard to feel like to do that split between caring, nurturing parent over here and, then an hour later switching gears and saying, give it to me good, Right. So, and then especially for moms of babies and young kids, like they're being touched all day long. And for a lot of women, it's this thing of like, you know what, like, do not touch me. I have had people touching me all freaking day. What I would like is to lie somewhere by myself, I mean,
it really is, when my wife was pregnant, it was really amazing to watch this transformation of, it's like her body is no longer hers. Like the idea that random people come up to touch your belly when you're pregnant is the most absurd. It's like, is there a sign on me that says it's okay to touch me now? In any other situation, like you're going to get,
arrested.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting to talk about some of these kind of factors that that there is a realm of normalcy, even when it's maybe as a man, it's like, well, it sucks that this we're not having as much sex, and it's like, what's wrong with us? It's like, well, nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Exactly. But the good news and the thing to keep in mind is that again, statistically, meaning group averages, the sexual frequency and the sexual satisfaction goes up over time. Like as the kids get a little bit older.
How much time are we talking about, Ari?
Yeah. Generally,
how much time?
Generally, each year is better than the one before. Once you clear those toddler years, it's sort of, at some point it levels out, but I think it really depends. There's some couples whose sex life just, gets better and better. And there are others where it really kind of flatlines or it tanks out, and then weeks and months go by without sexual encounters. And, once it's been a while, then it gets kind of weird and awkward to do this thing again.
It's sort of like, I wonder too, how much of that for the person with ADHD is sort of like, returning that phone call that you meant to do today, and then you forget again tomorrow, and then and then it's like it weighs on you like you're carrying this huge heavy thing around that's really not that hard to do, but because of time it becomes much more difficult. Now I know are doing a sex survey, and in the email that I got from you when you were launching this, you didn't put a kind of a deadline date on it. You were just hoping for 400 people, and you launched it 2 weeks ago. And how many people have filled it out now?
So as of today, I've had over 1,500, which I think it says a couple of things. I think
a lot of perverts out there.
I think the first thing that it says is that there really is, like, there's a strong interest in this subject. So I think that's one of the things it says. Another thing it says is that I have awesome friends who have done a great job at promoting this. Like I sent it out, I contacted a bunch of folks who have, good email lists or podcasts or, blogs or Twitter or whatever, and they've done an awesome job at spreading the word. So, there's a lot of good people in the world of ADHD. So, but yeah, what's awesome about having so many respondents, and of course I want as many as I can get, because the more we have, the better the data becomes. And by better, what I mean is more representative it is. If I only have 100 people, there's how many millions of people with ADHD, and 100 of them are going to speak for the lot.
Right.
So the more people we get, the greater variety of responses. But really, it's the more that my sample looks more closely like the larger population out there.
So you've had a couple thousand. How many did you say?
Over 1,500.
Okay, so about 1,500 people that responded, and this is an anonymous survey. But some of the demographics are a little skewed. You're looking for now more men, more people with or without, like.
Right. So what's interesting is that when I haven't really analyzed the data in any kind of way yet, although I have a lot of ideas of how I would like to. But what I've had is 75% women and 25% men as respondents. So a lot more women than men. And I've also, and that was surprising. I didn't think there was going to be a gender imbalance on that. And then also perhaps less surprising is I had 75% partners with ADHD and 25% partners without. And I should say in the survey, I'm limiting it to relationships where one person has ADHD and one person does not. And the reason is it makes for cleaner data if you limit out. Like, I don't want to, if I open it up to everybody and all sorts of things, it kind of blurs out the results. It's not as revealing. So, so yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised there are more people with ADHD and less without who are responding. So what I'd like everybody to respond no matter what your deal is, but I'd like more men. And I'd also like more partners without ADHD, just so that I have a little bit more of a balance between the two. Although the good news about having big numbers like I do is we can still analyze it. If I only had a few hundred, I'd be much more hesitant about what those results mean. So
what are the criteria then to fill out the survey?
Adults in a relationship where one person has ADHD and one person does not.
Okay.
And, I've had a number of people contact me saying, you know what, I'm not currently in a relationship, but I'd still like to participate. And the reason why I made the choice after a lot of thinking about it, not to include singles, is that, frankly, I think it's harder to remember in a prior relationship than it is to remember in this relationship. Yeah. And that's for everybody, Right. So, I wrestled and I thought about it, and I ran the survey by some people for comment and all this stuff. And really kind of what it came down to is, I think we're going to get more accurate results if we have people who are currently in a relationship.
And I'm going to post a link to the survey in a number of places. I'm going to post it in my community Facebook group. I'm going to post it on my Facebook page. It's going to be on my website. It's going to be in the podcast player that you're listening to this podcast in right now. If you tap on the icon for the podcast, you'll see the abridged version of the show notes, and there will be a direct URL right within there that will take you to the survey. And Ari, just so you know, I did complete the survey.
Nice.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
I liked, there were some questions that were asking about some behaviors. And one of the things that I liked that you asked was, because, I was looking at some of these questions and thinking, would people answer this honestly? And you asked something about, I think, in the realm of, fidelity in a relationship. And I think you guys have you in either this or a prior relationship. And I thought that was smart. And I was wondering if that was like, did that just kind of come to you to ask it that way? Because, if someone is concerned that their spouse might see that and they check yes, to something like that, well, then I can just say, well, it was a prior relationship, honey. It was, not as
prior relationship. Didn't mean anything.
They're
terrible
foolish
compared to you, honey. I love you the most. Well, I put in the whole question of fidelity because, first of all, we know there's already high rates of infidelity in the general population.
Yes.
But, there's this kind of idea out there that, maybe people with ADHD have more trouble with fidelity than people without. And, in terms of impulsivity, of kind of acting in the spur of the moment, as well as kind of getting bored of their primary partner and, seeking novelty. So,
it's exciting, adrenaline seeking, it's like, the risk of getting caught can be, it does stimulate the brain.
Yeah. So, on theory, it would make sense that perhaps people with ADHD have more affairs or, what I should say is more extramarital activities. So I separated it out in terms of purely a physical encounter with not a lot of emotional involvement, as well as primarily an emotional affair that possibly had some physical involvement. Because I think that those are very different events. Like getting drunk at a bar and having sex with someone is completely different than having an emotional, loving affair with somebody at work. In terms of the behaviors are different, the dynamics, the causes, the ways of addressing it after the fact, so I wanted to separate that out. But, this is like a lot of the questions in the survey. It's like, we can make a lot of guesses about how ADHD can impact that person's sexuality as well as the sexuality of their partner. So is the non-ADHD partner who feels kind of alone in the relationship, are they more likely to seek emotional support from somebody else that then drifts into kind of an inappropriate relationship? I don't know, maybe. So that's the whole point of the surveys, is to actually find out. I'm very happy to make things up and take guesses at things, but I would rather actually know for sure, are people with ADHD actually more likely to have affairs? Are the non-ADHD partners also perhaps more likely to have an affair as a result of the dynamics in the relationship? What about seeking novelty? What about, pornography? What about, the different barriers to sex in the relationship? So getting into bed at different times. I would postulate that is going to have an effect on the couple's sex life, but does it actually? What about medication? Does medication help? I would guess it does, but I don't know if it does. So, these are all the things that the survey is designed to answer for us. And, the goal is to be able to have some really good information that we can then use I'm going to do some writing and presenting.
Yeah, I wanted to know, what are you going to do with this information? Yeah,
so the idea is to use it really to kind of be able to give better advice to the couples that are out there. The individual couples and adults that I'm seeing in my office every day, but also for the writing and the presenting and training other clinicians on, these are the biggest, most common things that happen in these couples. Now, obviously, every couple is different. So, for any individual, you always need to focus on the individual.
Right.
But it's nice to know the lay of the land. Just like, if you're going to be a therapist or a coach or an organizer or a teacher or whatever, with folks with ADHD, you want to understand ADHD. You want to know the lay of the land. You're going to be much more effective.
Exactly. And, from a business standpoint, sex sells. So I think you chose both a great topic because it's of great service and value to the community. And I'm sure whatever you do with it, Ari, is going to do great.
And it's so much fun talking about it.
It's because you can you're doing this in the pursuit of professionalism, and you really are. And it's also fun.
Yeah. And it's, and it's not sort of it's not just some Cosmo quiz. I mean, I always kind of rip on Cosmo quizzes, but Men's Health has plenty of dumb quizzes also. So, but it's a really, I spent a lot of time on the survey really making sure that it gets to what we want it to. And, in terms of the anonymity, I should point out that, once the information is entered and you hit submit, it's gone. You can't pull that back up. And by the way, neither can anybody else on your computer. It's submitted and it's out of there. Also, what I'm doing is for the people who take the survey, once you're done, you can then, if you choose, certainly don't have to, but if you choose, you can enter in your email address, and people will then, so if you put in your email address, the survey participants will be the very first people to get the survey results. So I'm going to do other webinars and stuff, but if you want to be the first people to hear it, if you put in your email address, I'll then email you the invitations to that. And even there, the survey is through SurveyMonkey. They're the ones hosting it, but the email addresses are being stored on MailChimp. So I can't even put an email address and a survey together.
Right.
I don't have the ability to match up who said what. And that's really important because sex is such a sensitive topic that if I was to ask you face to face about your sex life, I'm going to get one series of answers. If I asked you, anonymously to fill something out, I'm going to get a different set of answers. So it's really important that people realize that this is totally anonymous.
Yeah, that's definitely a question that people have asked. Even in my community group, when I posted for people to submit questions that we'll get to in a little bit, one of the first responses was something about are you going to mention names? So so it was clearly a concern. How
about phone numbers? Are you going to mention their phone numbers?
Names, spouses' names, and your most favorite meme to like.
Yeah, we're going to forward these on to your grandmother, just so you know.
So what I want to do really quickly, Ari, because I don't know if I know that when you were doing your podcast, you had somebody kind of upload and do all the back end stuff. Well, I now do that too, but that costs money. So I'm gonna help pay for that by taking a quick break to thank our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Are you looking for a painless solution for video conferencing without the headache of complicated configurations? Go to erictivers.com/Zoom and get a Zoom room. Zoom is the video conference platform I use for my coaching group, and now I'm using it for podcast interviews. If you're a business owner or a coach, you've got to check out Zoom. Zoom also has plans designed for educational institutions and for healthcare and mental health providers who need HIPAA-compliant security. There are plans designed to meet all of your needs. You can get a Zoom room now for free by going to erictivers.com/Zoom. Pro plans begin at just $9.99 a month. Go to erictivers.com/Zoom for the most ADHD-friendly way to connect with others, no matter where you are. That's erictivers.com/Zoom.
I mean, I use that quite a bit, the bookmarking, when there's a part that I am really interested in holding on to. And I have actually taken my, I don't think I'm supposed to actually do this because they say no part can be played before an audience. But I think that there's an exception for education. But,
wait, they said that no part can be played for an audience. So
you know how at the end of the audio books they say no part of this book may be reproduced and blah blah blah. But sometimes there'll be a really good part in an audiobook where I'll bookmark it, and then I will, as I'm lecturing, actually say, okay, so I want you to hear a snippet from this book called Picking Cotton, for example, which is a story of a woman who had picked the wrong rapist out of a lineup, and he served many years. And when he was exonerated, they became good friends, and now they travel and they speak. And there's one part where she says, I closed my eyes, and for the longest time when I would close my eyes, I would still see Ronald Cotton's face as my rapist. And it's just powerful for the students to hear that. If I were to tell the students, oh, yeah, people will remember that for a long time, that doesn't have the same weight as if they actually get to listen to somebody else's voice. Or when I speak or when I teach, I do a lot of multimedia stuff because it also just helps with their focus. If I can stop lecturing for a couple minutes and just introduce it something new for them to look at or listen to. So I do a lot of NPR or Audible or YouTube, things like that. I think that there's a fair use aspect for educators.
Yes. Now, when you said that, though, I am wondering, on one of the episodes, I recorded a teeny tiny clip of the sample for the promo. I mean, I don't think that Audible would be upset with that because I'm trying to send people back to them. So I may well have broken the law and all copyright.
I don't think it matters.
No one's listening to this podcast anyways. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. Go to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. And we are back. So, Ari, we were talking about sex, which is our favorite topic, right?
It is.
I mean, just as the overgeneralization of we are two men and sex is just by the nature of the way our brains are wired. We like sex.
Yeah. But
no overgeneralizations here at all.
Right. But the thing is, women really like sex also. And of course, if we're talking about straight guys, women are the people we're having sex with, right? But when it comes to relationship sex, actually, sex is as important to the women as to the men. Okay. Because it's such, now in terms of what the women and men would like sexually can vary. There are some gender differences there. And obviously, if you pick any random couple, there's going to be some differences there as well. But, sex is, in terms of the survey, I mean, the title of the survey, it's ADHD relationship sex survey. It's not anonymous sex survey. It's not paid for sex survey. It's not masturbating while watching porn survey. It's, it's about the relationship. And, sex plays a big part in romantic relationships, or at least, well, it does. Even if it's certainly with its presence, it plays a big part. But frankly, the absence of sex can also play a big part, especially when it's not mutually desired for it to be absent in the relationship.
Absolutely. So I printed out, because I can get easily distracted while looking at a computer screen. I printed out the questions, and but of course I didn't look at it closely. And in Facebook where it says "see more" when it's a longer post, it didn't print the extended version of these questions. So I'm like, oh man, half these questions are like cut off. So I'm trying to see what I can. So I'm trying to actually pay attention to you and read this at the same time. I'm doing a lousy job of it right now. Okay, let's see here. There's questions about processing styles in relation to sex. So processing styles tell me a lot about myself and what works and what doesn't, and what strategies don't work for me. What research is out there in evaluating the use of processing styles in awareness to sex? Are there ways that processing styles can be used to understand one's partner sexually?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think in terms of, is there research on there? I have to say I doubt it, but frankly, there's a lot of areas where there should be better research and there isn't. And in terms of this topic, ADHD and sex, there's very little research out there, other than, looking at things kind of like, I don't know, unplanned pregnancies in adolescence and things, but that's only kind of tangentially about sex, really. So I think really what it comes down to is the better you know yourself, the better you're going to be sexually. Because of course, if you don't know what you like and don't like, how is your partner ever going to figure it out? So
That's
the
true.
the more you can communicate, I like this, I don't like that, touch me here, not there, touch me in this way, not that way, harder, softer, faster, slower, whatever. So knowing your processing styles is just one more aspect of that.
And I imagine too important for just communication. I mean, that's, if you have someone who's a verbal processor and someone who's more an auditory processor, or needs to be touched to receive what the message that's being said. Like I'm someone who I just need to talk and and sometimes the things I'm saying, I just need to get it out of my head, and so like that's important to understand that about me. If I'm talking about something of relevance, that not everything I say actually has like a lot of meaning when I'm talking to my wife anyways, it's, and my wife is someone who, I will joke that she gives a lot of detail. And so her parentheses have parentheses, and I'm always just like, what? It's like, bring it down, what's the one thing you want when you know about what you just said? Because I just lost you. So I imagine that does equate into the bedroom as well.
Well, it does. So it's, knowing yourself well, but then also being attuned to your partner. And, so one of you may be much more visual, one of you may be much more auditory, one of you may be much more, tactile, whatever. So I think it's important to know yourself first, and then also to know your partner, and to remember that what works for one may not be exactly the thing that works for the other. But that's okay. As long as both people are happy at the end of it, it's all good.
So let's see another comment here. I have one comment that says, 2 of my favorite ADHD people in one place. It should be great. I think they're talking about you and I, Ari. I hope so too. Otherwise, they're on the wrong thread, which is very possible. So another comment. Let's see. Sex can be so damn hot in my head and so damn boring in bed. It's a good comment.
Yeah. There's a lot in that comment. So,
and not just the fact that it rhymed.
Right. I think first of all, there should be a bumper sticker for that. But, I guess what I would wonder, kind of as the shrink here, what I would wonder is, what happens between the head and the bed? And, so that makes the bed not as hot as what this person is thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, then it becomes a matter of, is how comfortable do they feel sharing their fantasies with their partner?
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't feel comfortable, is it because of their partner or is it because of themselves? Mm-hmm. So, and this is one of the ways that sex really kind of pushes a relationship to grow and pushes each of the people to grow. So, if the reason why this person isn't sharing is that they feel that their partner is kind of judgmental, mm-hmm. or gets too anxious, or just one way or another kind of closes down intimacy and disclosure, mm-hmm. then that would be a good conversation to have. Mm-hmm. I feel like I can't be fully open with you about this, and I don't like not being able to be fully open with you about this.
And now, would you recommend having that conversation in the bedroom or out of the bedroom?
I'm going to steal a line from Barry McCarthy, who's like one of the big sex researchers. And he says, you should talk about sex with your clothes on at the kitchen table, not naked in bed.
And which makes sense, though, because then you're less vulnerable and open to more of that conversation.
Exactly. So, maybe the problem is, like I said, that the partner doesn't give the impression, maybe this isn't the case, and maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe the partner isn't sort of open and accepting enough to this. Mm-hmm. Now, open and accepting means I'm willing to hear what you're saying. It doesn't mean sign me up, carte blanche for anything you want to do. It just means let's talk about it, just like we're going to talk about, so what are we having for dinner? Oh, chili. Oh, God, I do not like, no, I'm not at all interested in chili. What else can we have? As opposed to, I cannot believe you're the kind of person who likes chili. Why would you think am I that kind of person who would like chili? I can't believe how offensive you can be.
If you want to go have chili, go in the bedroom yourself and enjoy your chili.
Exactly. So, so maybe the problem is the partner. Maybe the problem is the person themselves, that they're not fully accepting of this. They feel a little bit kind of guilty or embarrassed or ashamed or weird about whatever it is that turns them on. And they're just looking for reasons in their partner of why they shouldn't be able to say it. Mm-hmm. Whereas really, maybe it's more about that person not feeling comfortable sharing it. Mm-hmm. So that's one thought. Another thought is maybe what this hot stuff going on in this person's head, it's not reality based, which is fine. I mean, that's why we have fantasies. Like I have fantasies, especially this winter, of moving to St. John in the Caribbean. Like that is an awesome fantasy. I
love it.
Never going to happen because, reality doesn't work that way, but it's a hell of a fantasy and it got me through a crappy winter. So, so maybe it's a matter of accepting that what goes on in your head isn't going to happen in reality. But what can be really hot is sharing the fantasies with your partner, even if what you're doing is kind of standard stuff. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I mean, it's this exploring the possibilities. This is what keeps sex interesting and vibrant over the years and also the decades.
Mm-hmm. So what do you recommend to somebody who's maybe building up the courage to tell their partner something that maybe they've wanted to share for a long time, have been scared to share, and they finally do? What would you recommend as one, what's the best way to kind of open that conversation? And then what about a response if it's the response is not what they hope for, almost if it's the response that they were afraid of?
Mm-hmm. So I think, first of all, if it's something big, and it sounds like it kind of is, maybe, you know what? It may be a quick and easy conversation. That's possible. But let's be honest. Odds are this is not, it ain't going to be quick. It ain't going to be easy. It's not going to be one and done. Mm-hmm. So know that going in. It's not going to
be a quickie.
Yeah. So, so go into it with that expectation that, you know what, we're going to have this conversation a few times before we come to some resolution, whatever that turns out to be. Mm-hmm. But there's something to be said for feeling like at least I have my day in court. Like you still may not be into this thing I want to try, but at least I feel like we really talked about it and I had a shot at it, as opposed to I could never bring it up, or I did bring it up and you shot it down immediately. And then, we never actually got a chance to really talk about it. So I think you need to kind of preface the conversation in a productive way.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, I've been thinking, this is something that's really important to me. I don't know how you're going to feel about this, or I kind of suspect that you're not going to be that into it, but, I want to feel like I can at least bring things up. And I would hope that you can feel that you can bring things up also. We don't have to like all the same stuff. We probably won't, but I feel like I need to at least be able to bring this up and get a reasonable response to it.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's good. What about the rejection piece of it? So if the partner kind of shuts it down.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, let's sort of define rejection here, because there's kind of a range,
Sure.
There's one kind of rejection is, what's wrong with you that you would like that? Or am I not enough for you already? How terrible a person are you that you would want more? Or how terrible a person am I that I am not enough for you with what we're already doing? So like really kind of defensive, not helpful kind of reactions. So, there's that, but then there's also the rejection of, we've had a long conversation about it. I understand why this thing would be of interest to you or turns you on. It doesn't do it for me. I can't go there with you. And unfortunately, I think we're going to need to cross this one off the list of things that we can do.
Okay.
So like that is a very different kind of outcome. It's kind of like there's concerts I like to go to that my wife, some of them she's interested, a lot of them she's not. You know what? I go to them by myself. So, but I don't feel like less of a person. I don't resent her for it. She doesn't resent me for dragging her along to it. Like we've had that conversation and it's just one of those things, just like we've had conversations about other things. It's like, yeah, neither one of us is going to that thing. But it's an easier conversation to walk away from and still feel okay about yourself and still feel okay about your partner. The ones that get really defensive or offensive, what kind of a person are you? What kind of person do you think I am? How am I not enough? Guilt. Nobody feels good coming out of those conversations, either about themselves or about their partner. So, I think those are the harder conversations to have. And I think that, that's why it probably takes more than one discussion.
Do you have any good books or resources that listeners can go to if they're, even with just basic communication, between spouses that can kind of help with these kinds of conversations?
There's kind of a bunch of good people, but one of my favorite writers on sex is a psychologist named Marty Klein, and that's Klein, and he's written a bunch of stuff. And I just really he has a very kind of straightforward, kind of easy way of, talking about sex and talking about couples talking about sex.
Okay.
So, I think that the best way to have a good conversation about sex is to not be judgmental about it.
Yeah.
But frankly, that's good advice for
anything,
talking about anything.
Right. Right.
Being judgmental and defensive and offensive doesn't help any conversation move forward.
All right. So speaking of other people that write about some of this, one question is if you have any comments on Dr. Rory Reed's work. Are you familiar with him?
You know what? I'm not.
I guess he's done a good amount of work on hypersexuality, and he was, trying to get it as in the DSM-5. I don't think that it was accepted, but he doesn't know if this guy is well respected in the field. So just talking about the idea of hypersexuality with ADHD. So you're not familiar with his work?
I am not, but, I can make some general comments about it. So, the whole hypersexuality thing, the DSM, that's a whole nother discussion.
Right.
In the sense of like, is this a legitimate disorder? And do we want it to be a disorder? Do we not want it to be a disorder? So I think there's also the question of if someone has bipolar disorder, for example, and they're in a manic episode, one of the symptoms of a manic episode or a hypomanic episode is extreme sexuality, like, raging libido. So if that's the case, then that's, I think, a different discussion than it is if it's someone who does not have bipolar disorder, and in some sort of, regular and ongoing way, they just have a very strong sex drive. So, that's a different thing. But I think it also, if you want to have sex 5 times a week and your partner wants to have sex twice a week, there's going to be a problem, Now, if you're with a partner who wants to have sex 7 times a week and you want to have sex 5 times a week, there's also going to be a problem, but you're going to be on the other side of that problem, So
in that situation, what are some reasonable kind of compromises that you think couples can possibly agree upon?
I think that, well, first of all, reasonable is as defined by the couple,
Well, yeah.
So whenever there's a difference in sex drive, which is really a very common kind of a thing, just when you roll the dice, I think it's a matter of the person with a higher sex drive to show a certain amount of generosity of being willing to sometimes forego sex or have it, get less sex than they're looking for. Or to take care of their own needs. And there needs to be some generosity on the lower sex drive partner to be willing to sometimes have sex when they don't really want to, or to do something else. You know what? I don't want to have sex, but I will help get you off.
Okay.
Or even I'll just lie there with you while you get yourself off. Like I'll give you that much at least. So it's about negotiation as couples negotiate everything else. The difference is when it comes to what we're having for dinner, neither of us has that much of an emotional investment, and you don't take your sense of self isn't at stake when we decide what we're having for dinner, as opposed to when we're talking about sex.
And maybe to not take it personally when you don't finish.
Yeah,
your bowl of chili.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're full on half a bowl of chili and you are fine, then that doesn't mean that the person who made the chili is a crappy cook and you're not satisfied with them, So
are we really talking about chili here?
I don't think we are. So
let me ask you another question here.
Yeah.
Do you think that, let's see, so in relation to people with ADHD, this person is wondering if they need to constant novelty makes us more likely consumers of kink.
That is one of the questions we're looking at in the survey, because of course, what I would predict based on what we know about ADHD, which of course could be dead wrong. But what I would predict is that, people with ADHD, because they get bored with the same old thing, that they will have a higher drive for novelty, which means a greater variety of things that they do sexually with their partner, a greater kind of desire to mix it up. So, we do like 10 different things sexually, but I don't want to do the same thing twice in a row, whereas their partner may be very happy to do the same thing 6 times in a row. But I think also some of that goes into being more kinky, more adventurous, less sort of like traditional kinds of things. So that's one of the things that I'm looking at in the survey that I'm really kind of curious to know. Now, of course, but there is the fact of, do people with ADHD have a greater desire for novelty? Like yes or no, we find X percent of,
I will answer for myself.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So, but there's plenty of people without ADHD who are really, really kinky, and there's plenty of people with ADHD who are total vanilla. So, so one of the things is, there's kind of what the numbers are, so X percent of people with ADHD seek novelty, but only Y percent without ADHD seek novelty. And therefore we can say people with ADHD are then Z percent more likely to seek novelty or something. But then there's a question of, is that good or bad? Well, it's both. On the one hand, a person who's better, who seeks novelty will bring more interest and spice to that relationship.
Well, that's
sexually.
more spicy chili.
Yeah, exactly. More spicy chili, more different spices, some with beans, some without. Yeah. So that's a good thing as long as it's consensual and both people are happy with it. And if it's this thing of on the one hand, wow, honey, that was awesome that you introduced this thing. I really love it. Let's keep doing it. And other times, I'm not really into the Tabasco. Like the other stuff is good, but I just don't like the Tabasco. Can we not do, we tried Tabasco and I don't really like it. Or you know what? I've heard of Tabasco. It doesn't sound like the thing I'd be into. So if it's okay with you, I'd prefer to not get into Tabasco.
I don't really like the peppers put there. It's just not really where I like them.
Exactly. It burns too much. So, so there's that. Or if there's too big a disconnect between the desires for novelty, it can become problematic because the person with ADHD may feel like, you know what, this is a good relationship in other ways, perhaps, hopefully, but I don't feel like my sexual needs are getting met. I need to find that somewhere else. And, if they can negotiate that out and it's a, consensual agreement, that can be a very fine arrangement. On the other hand, if it's not a consensual agreement or, something is agreed to, but then it becomes something else, then that can be very kind of destructive in a relationship. So, but again, it's always relative to your partner. So your partner might be really kinky, but you're like super kinky, and that difference is too much. So it's not simply one person is really kinky and the other one's like straight-laced, vanilla boring, and that's the problem. It's always relative to your partner. So, that's an important question. Do you see your partner's greater need for novelty as a good thing that makes your sex life and relationship better? Or do you see it as something threatening and problematic? So it's all how the couple negotiates it out.
All right. I have a handful more questions here, and let's see if we can maybe do some quick answers to some of these. Okay. Promiscuity in girls with undiagnosed, untreated ADHD. How does that impact sex as an adult?
I think that can have a big impact. Particularly, I think it all depends on how you feel about that promiscuity. If you feel guilty, if you feel ashamed, if you feel bad about it, if you had really negative experiences in terms of violence during sexual encounters or, STDs or unplanned pregnancies, that's going to have probably a negative effect. On the other hand, if you look at it and say, you know what, I did stupid things when I was young. Everyone does stupid things. It's not who I am now, whatever. Then it's going to be different.
So it sounds so much. Go ahead.
Or if you look at it as, you know what, I was with a bunch of different people and I got to say, I know a lot better now what I like and don't like than I would have if I didn't try these things. So you know what, maybe it wasn't so bad, and knock on wood, I got lucky that nothing bad happened.
I was going to say, it sounds a lot like, this is very kind of cognitive behavioral therapy based. It's not so much about what happens or what's happening, but how you think about what has happened or what's happening.
Absolutely. It's all about what you think about it.
All right, another question. Sexless marriage, doomed?
Not necessarily. And again, it depends on, is it mutually agreed upon? Do both people feel okay about the lack of sex? Because again, I mean, that 20%, you still got an 80, that ain't bad if everything else is good.
Okay.
Where it becomes bad is when there's a disagreement, and often there is. And I think that, it's not that lack of desire for sex isn't mutually held. And that's really where it becomes problematic. So I think it is worth addressing, because a partner who wants the sex more and feels shut out is going to start to shut down in other ways in the relationship. So I think it is not a trivial problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the other person just needs to put out and be done with it, but that it needs to be addressed and negotiated in a productive way. And of course, the queen of the sexless marriage in terms of presenting and writing about it is a psychologist named Michelle Weiner Davis. And
that can't be ironic.
I know.
Her real name was Weiner. And that she includes it.
Right. And she's got great stuff online and elsewhere. So
Michelle Weiner Davis. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
We will have to get a link to that. I wonder what Google will do with my SEO when I link to her stuff.
I know.
Okay. Next question. Sex-based risk-taking among adults with ADHD. What's common? What's there to be concerned about?
I think that, what's common is just general impulsivity, and especially if you factor in additional substance use. So drinking, smoking pot, whatever, if you tend to drink too much already, and then, you're in situations that you can potentially act out sexually, then that's a problem in all the kind of predictable ways. So it may be that being less impulsively sexual begins with not drinking as much, or just not putting yourself into certain kinds of situations. And my whole thing about impulsivity is it's much harder to say, don't be impulsive in that, don't act without thinking in that situation that you don't have time to think about not acting without thinking,
Right.
So really the better approach is to avoid those potentially problematic situations right from the get-go. Because once you're drunk and chatting up some hottie, like at that point to say, okay, bye-bye, is going to be much harder than to not put yourself into that situation.
And what about the concerns though? So are there things that people maybe are even if they're permissive to, that they just look at it as maybe a kink behavior or something that's just, kind of more perceived as exciting, that really is of concern?
I think what it comes down to is, how do you feel about it afterwards?
Well, I guess my question is related more to like actual health concerns.
Right. So, and that's kind of why I think it's a matter of how do you feel about it afterwards? Because of course, lots of things seem like a good idea at the time, but it's how do you feel about it afterwards when you're possibly sober, but you're also not horny anymore, and you're out of this situation, you've had time to reflect. So, So, I mean, whatever turns you on is fine, but it's a question of, are you putting yourself into situations that you then regret, where you look at it and you go, well, nothing bad happened, but man, it really could have, I need to not do that anymore. If that's the case, then you need to kind of rethink it maybe, or take some steps to make it a safer experience. But you know what, if at the end of it, you're like, you know what, actually that was sort of okay. You know what, I will accept that risk. Because, every time you walk out the door, you accept a certain amount of risk. Every time you get in the car, you accept a certain amount of risk.
Have you ever seen that bumper sticker? It says, Surgeon General's warning, doing anything at any time with anybody might be hazardous to your health.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not saying you need to be act like a nun and never leave your basement, but by the same token,
I've seen some crazy movies about nuns.
Yeah, in basements. So yeah, I mean, it's just about making smart choices.
Will you be doing any more work with Dr. Jill McDevitt? I don't know if I'm saying her name right.
Right.
Comment was, your webcast was very good.
You know what? I don't know if I'm going to do anything. I mean, I may, but
nothing's planned.
Nothing planned as of the moment, but Linda Ragley and I are planning to do this summer sometime another run of the ADHD Between the Sheets. So we're going to do a little bit shorter, a little bit more condensed, but it's going to have all the information from the survey. So I think in a lot of ways, it's going to be a much better experience. I think technically also there are, a couple of technical issues last time, as there is with any first thing. I think it's going to be a much better experience. And
I would like to invite you to actually do, I've been really thinking about the idea of doing ADHD Rewired webinars. So maybe, and I'm totally just thinking out loud here, I've done a lot of things like that in this podcast, and most have turned out pretty good. But I want to maybe invite you to do maybe the kickoff of ADHD Rewired webinars when you guys are ready to do this with your data.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds good.
Awesome. And it's interesting. So the name Anna with one N followed by an exclamation point looks like anal. I just want to say, as I'm looking through my list,
right. It's all about context.
Sorry, Anna. No last name, so we're all good. Let's see. And one person said that they had no idea that promiscuity and undiagnosed ADHD were connected. Basically, they're feeling good that they're hearing that these things may be related. Let's see. Thank goodness for editing, right? Although on my last podcast, it was a total just we're just having a conversation. I had no plan. We decided to go with see how long people can stand dead air for, and so it was like an intentional dead air. Made for great audio.
Right.
Let's see. A lot of these are just kind of repeats of the prior questions. Oh, one question. How important is an uncluttered bedroom for one's sex life?
Well, depends on who you are.
Yeah, so much of this depends, yeah.
Yeah, but, I think really what it comes down to is if it's important to you, then it's important. And or if it's important to your partner, then it's important. Mm-hmm. So, I could see on the one hand that having a bunch of stuff there, especially if it's kind of like work stuff or it's laundry to be folded or whatever, that can be kind of distracting and take you out of the mood. Okay. So if that is in fact what's happening, then yeah, you probably want to do something about it. But the other side of it, and of course, whenever I answer a question, I always go to I address both extremes and come back to the middle. So, the other side of it is you cannot wait for the perfect moment to have sex. Everything is put away. There's nothing else to be done. The kids are at grandma's and, the lights are out. For sex to happen, as for anything to happen, sometimes you need to kind of go with what you've got. Mm-hmm. And because otherwise, if you wait for the perfect moment, you're rarely going to have any sex. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And of course, when I say sex, I'm using the term most broadly, not simply intercourse, but mm-hmm. rather, whatever it is that you might be interested in doing at that time.
So I know in conversations that I've had with individuals, and I'll just say even for myself, there has been that moment during while having sex where that item from your to-do list just crosses your mind.
Yeah.
One, I'm wondering how much more common is that do you think for people with versus without ADHD? And do you think if it's not that much, if it's pretty similar, do you think more of it might be related, like an issue of impulsivity of saying that thought that comes across your mind versus just keeping it as a thought?
Right. And again, this is one of those questions we're looking at because, theory predicts people with ADHD are going to be more distracted during sex than people without, except theory also predicts that they wouldn't be, because if you're really into it, you're going to be hyper-focused mm-hmm. and the world disappears. So I'm not sure. We'll find out. But obviously, everybody gets distracted during sex. We mm-hmm. all have those times where we're like, did I ever send that email? I wonder, did she ever get back to me? Oh, when I go to the grocery, do we have more shoe polish? There's big important things. Hey, honey, do we have more shoe polish? So I think
I've been meaning to ask you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Here we are. You're giving it to me good. But do we have more shoe polish? I was just thinking about
why. That. Just use the lube.
Right. Exactly. So I think that it becomes a matter of, like many things, of rolling with it, mm-hmm. to not take it personally, whether you are the person getting distracted or your partner is the person getting distracted, mm-hmm. to just let it roll by, focus back in on the moment.
Mindfulness.
Yeah, exactly. And, like if you feel like your partner is starting to lose focus, mm-hmm. shift it up a little bit, turn up the intensity a little bit, start talking to them, something to kind of, bam, they're back in. Because that's what happens in normal sexual experiences, is there's a little bit of an ebb and flow, even if it sort of ultimately reaches the end. So to not take it personally and to just sort of bring it on back in, because again, if you're looking for the perfect experience, you're really too often going to be disappointed, and then feelings get hurt, and then people say things that aren't nice, and then somebody doesn't want to initiate next time. So, these are not big problems, mm-hmm. really. Mm-hmm.
So, let's see. I'm trying to think. What other questions haven't I asked you? Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you want to say? Anything that is worth kind of going into about this?
Oh, man, there are so many things. I guess, the bigger picture here is, I kind of started out talking about this, that, sex is important for a couple's relationship satisfaction. But I really sort of follow the work. There's a guy named David Schnarch, Schnarch, who's written a bunch of books. One of them is called Intimacy and Desire, which I think is his best one, where he talks about...
Is this for clinicians or is this for general public?
Actually, this is for the general public.
Okay.
And he talks about how the process of creating a good sex life, by which I mean the process of negotiating out a good sex life, makes people into better people. Like you were a better person, you were a better partner in the relationship.
How so?
Well, it's because sex is such a personal and sensitive subject that we don't tolerate bad behavior on the other person's part. But sex is also really important for most of us. So we're not willing to forego it, you know, so we're kind of caught in this dilemma of this is really sensitive and difficult to talk about. And yet I can't not talk about it. So to negotiate this out, I need to handle it in a respectful and decent kind of way, approach and respond to you in a caring and decent way. But also you need to do the same to me. And if you're not approaching me decently and respectfully, I'm going to give you a poke on that. You know what? That's not good, or I don't appreciate that, or that doesn't work for me, and vice versa.
Are you sure that giving a poke with the right?
Yeah, well, so or a whip or whatever you're into. So,
well, it's okay. You know, the two things I realized I didn't really ask about is one is porn, and two is open relationships. I think people are very curious about that. Right. Any quick comments on either of those topics?
You know, I think that both of those fall into the novelty category. And again, those are both questions that we're looking at in the survey. So, you know, are people with ADHD more prone to use pornography? I don't know. Maybe that's one of the things. But if so, I think it falls into that novelty. And, you know, for all this sort of nonsense hype out there about how porn is destroying relationships, you know, the truth of it is porn is what it is. And it's a question of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and how does it get negotiated out? What can I do? What can you do? How do we feel about it? Can we live with it?
Because I've heard, you know, I've been done counseling with couples, and, you know, one couple will say, well, they feel like porn is like cheating. And I don't know. To me, it's like, I just have a hard time seeing it that way.
And I agree. And maybe this is more the male perspective, but, you know, my issue with, if you are going to define porn as cheating, you are setting yourself up to feel hurt and sensitive a lot. And I think you are going to be disappointed, as opposed to seeing porn as something like, you know what, I'm not into it. I don't understand why you are, but I can live with it. Like, whatever, you know. That is a better position to take. But, you know, it takes some getting to, maybe, for some couples to get there. And it's not just about the non-porn partner to sort of be more accepting. It may also be for the person who enjoys porn to explain why they enjoy it, and to be more supportive and more expressive and loving towards their partner, so that they feel like there is a good connection there, and porn is just like whatever. It's like ping pong. Who cares? So, you know, so I think in terms of porn, there's, you know, so that I think, you know, obviously another step or 10 beyond that is open relationships. You know, again, theory might predict that people with ADHD are more likely to have, you know, what I called in the survey, consensual non-monogamous activities. So either one person goes out and does things on their own, or both people go out and do things on their own, or other people, or they're doing things with other people together. You know, open relationships are I mean, I don't know, they're not new by any means, but sort of like some acceptance of open relationships is a much newer thing. Facebook actually just recently added under relationship status, you can now select, besides, you know, married, single, whatever, you can select in an open relationship. So there's some greater acceptance of it. And, you know, they're a double-edged sword, because I think if not handled well, if not negotiated out honestly and fairly, they're a recipe for disaster. And if the relationship is not stable in other ways, this is just like, you know, lighting the powder keg. On the other hand, you know, for some couples, either it's just a way to add some sexual excitement to the relationship, or it's one of those things where, like, you know, we talked about the couple where the one person wants to have sex 5 times a week and the other wants to have sex twice a week. I don't know. Maybe one of the ways of siphoning off 1 or 2 of those times is that the higher sex drive partner goes and has some, you know, does things with somebody else. And, you know, the lower sex drive partner may feel very happy about not being on the hook for that. So,
so much of it is just how you think about it.
It is. And it's about how it gets communicated and negotiated, which, by the way, is about everything else in a relationship, how it gets communicated and negotiated. So, so as far as I'm concerned, I think it is a viable thing to do, but it depends how you do it, just like everything else.
I think this has been a great conversation. I think that there's so many more questions still. I mean, this is why you're doing this research, and I'll be very excited to have you share, with us once you have analyzed that research. So you're committed to the official ADHD Rewired webinar series. Now we got to write that down so I remember that I said that.
Right.
That's how I started my first coaching group. It was just, I was just talking about something, and then I just started talking about this idea of creating this coaching group. I had when I hit the record button, that wasn't planned, and I did, and it's all been, it's been all good from there. So sometimes impulsivity has its benefits.
Exactly.
So, all right, here's what I'm going to ask. I don't know how you are doing on time. I know that we targeted 30 to 45 minutes. We're at an hour 9 right now, so it's kind of par for the course. So we're probably going to end it here for this episode. I did want to talk to you a little bit about Chad. I might break that up or do it as a bonus episode this week. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, but hang on the line. And thank you so much. Tell people where they can reach you, and also maybe if you have a direct link to that survey. But I will post it in all the places that I post information.
Sure. Yeah, and for which I'm very appreciative. So the survey link is ADHDrelationshipsexsurvey.com. So that's the place to go. And otherwise, for me, you can get information about my books and everything in podcasts and whatnot at adultadhdbook.com. And by the way, now that I'm doing sex stuff, the word adult in there takes on like a whole new meaning.
Oh, man. I bet you're getting some interesting. Is that helping your SEO? I bet it probably is. I don't know. Getting pinged in all different kinds of ways now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I forgot to do my random question round. The only thought was that I don't think I'd be able to stick to anything appropriate. So maybe it's just, because the thoughts that were things like, favorite porn, recommended sex toy company, and things like that. And, I just don't know if that's going to add any value unless you really have a favorite adult film.
I'll actually share instead my favorite sort of sex toy company. It's babeland.com. So it's a women-owned website. They got a few stores, but they just have really good quality stuff, not at all skeevy, lots of educational stuff on there as well. So I'll give a shout out to those guys.
Babeland.com. I can only imagine right now.
Yeah.
It's like high quality sex toys and books and
and videos and lingerie and all the good sexy stuff. So
interesting.
What's really cool is there's been a real kind of renaissance maybe in the whole sex toy industry, in the sense that it's become much more kind of women friendly. And even in 50 Shades of Grey, I never read it, I never saw the movie, I don't know if I ever will, but just because I hear it's kind of cheesy and whatever. But, I was walking through Target, freaking Target, the other day, and right there, not on the end cap, but on the side of the end cap, they had 50 Shades of Grey. They had a blindfold, some lube or something, and a little vibrating ring, at freaking Target.
Really?
So this is becoming much, much more sort of accepted in really kind of mainstream culture. It used to be it was some dirty, skeevy store and the back, the end of some alley or something, and only dirty old men went there. But nowadays, it's a much more open kind of a thing, and I think that's a very good thing.
Well, maybe now that CVS has taken cigarettes out of the front of the stores, they'll replace it with vibrators and sex toys.
That would be great. Much healthier for you.
Absolutely. It's exercise. There's so much that's good about it.
There is.
I just got to let it go from there. My brain's going to way too inappropriate places, and
You're totally going to lose your G rating on this if you go anywhere else with this.
So, Ari, thank you so much. And again, hang on the line. Well, ADHD Rewired listeners, whether you're new to the show or you've been listening for a while, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. All right, are you ready to be productive? Get out your pen or your favorite to-do list app. Go ahead, I'll wait. All right, ready? First item, check off anything you've already done. Pat yourself on the back. Next, go to erictivers.com/Chad or open up your podcast player for the link to make a donation to Chad's 1 in 15 million campaign. The estimated time for this task is only 3 minutes. Next task, please tell at least 2 other people about Chad's financial needs and do whatever it takes to get them to donate. Estimated time, 10 minutes to 2 hours. Time may scale in relation to the amount you're asking for. Make sure the person you ask also does the same, because if they ask 2 people, and they ask 2 people, and they ask 2 people, it's a lot of people. And if you're done with that, reward yourself with some sex surveys. Go ahead and complete Ari's sex survey. It took me, I think it was 12 minutes. The link, again, is in the podcast app or on this episode's show notes. And if you feel the momentum going, go to iTunes or Stitcher and please leave me a review and a rating and let me know what you think of this podcast. It does help others find me when I get those positive ratings and reviews. And as a reminder, outlines of each episode are available at ADHDrewired.com. If a book or other resource was mentioned during the interview, you will find them in the show notes at my website. Also, an abridged version of the show notes with links to the resources mentioned are in your podcast player. Most podcast players support this. Tap on the ADHD Rewired logo on your podcast player and check it out. That is the end. There ain't no more. This is Eric Tivers, and it is past my bedtime. Good night.